All right. Well, thanks everyone. It's great to be the last talk of the day before happy hour, right? So you know what that means. But just as a quick reminder, if you weren't here earlier, Melissa O, I'm the managing director for TGY Advisors. I'm a former Homeland Security executive and now provide consulting to startups and go to market to government. So I'm really excited and pleased to have up here with colleagues from the government, and they're here to help.
Always.
And so we have Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Miltenberger. He's commanding officer of the 200 Cyber Protection Team, and Dr. Peter Khooshabeh from Army DEVCOM ARL. So this fireside chat is focused on, how government, industry, and academia can collaborate to stay mission ready in an increasingly tested environment. Both of our speakers sit at different parts along the innovation to mission spectrum. And so I'd like to explore, how government can work with you all together to ensure we're not just keeping pace with threats, but staying ahead of them. So if I could ask you both to introduce yourselves, your role, and help the audience understand how your organization plays with respect to that mission.
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kenny Miltenberger, commanding officer of 2003 Cyber Protection Team. So I am an active duty Coast Guard member. I know 3 people in the audience know what the Coast Guard is, but the Coast Guard is an armed service in the United States, and we have 3 primary missions that we do. We secure our borders, we enable the marine transportation system, and then we respond in crisis and contingency. And so those are our kind of 3 main buckets and goals in what we do. And so what I do specifically is I run a deployable cyber protection team, which is a unit that's capable of conducting hunt missions for malicious cyber activity, cybersecurity assessments, and incident response. And if you look across the government, and specifically Army, Navy, Air Force, they have these things called cyber protection teams too. And what makes us special is that we focus our missions on domestic critical infrastructure that's owned primarily by the private sector or sometimes private-public partnerships. And we work to secure that infrastructure if it's in the marine environment or maritime adjacent. And so that's kind of teeing up how we kind of work with private sector every day, and we're working with your C-suites and your organizations to further national security.
Hi everyone, I'm Pete Khooshabeh. I am the regional lead for our DEVCOM Army Research Lab across the West Coast. My background is I have a PhD in computational cognitive science, and the whole time I've been about a decade and a half with the Army Research Lab. It's been on the West Coast, initially with our university-affiliated research centers. There are 2 in the state of California, in Southern California. So I spent the majority of my career down there, been back up here in Northern California for about a year and a half. So as regional lead, I sit within DEVCOM ARL's Research Business Directorate, and within RBD, what I do is science integration across the nexus of our lab with our academic and industry partners. And so earlier this afternoon, I spoke about one of the special initiatives within the Army called the X-Tech program. And so it's an example of how we engage with the broader kind of innovation ecosystem across the country. And so the Army Research Lab has about 1,100 people. We're doing the fundamental science and engineering either within the lab at our headquarters in Maryland, and over the last 10 years, we've really borne out this regional model where alongside academic and ever more so industry partners, we're co-developing and being complementary to what folks out in the places like Silicon Valley are doing to really improve national security and keep pace with our near peers. So it's great to be here alongside our friends from the Coast Guard and others.
Picking up on that.
Okay. Well, I wanted to double click on what you were talking about, Pete, about the Army X-Tech Prize. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that actually looks like for folks in the audience that might be interested?
Sure. Yeah. So the impetus for standing up kind of national presence for the lab back in 2016, with AirOS being one of the first sites, was to really showcase academic partners what we do and who we are, so that we're elbow to elbow with the kind of top universities across the country. And so alongside that, as we had that regional expansion with trusted university partners, very quickly the Army started using prize authorities, and what that looked like was a low barrier of entry for founders and kind of us literally meeting them where we were. And so when the X-Tech prize competition started back in 2018, we had regional sites across the country where we would do these pitch competitions in places like LA and Chicago and Austin and Boston. And so since COVID, like everything else, it's moved to a kind of purely initially virtual showcase where it's still a very low. And so in this case, the prize competition that we're highlighting, that again is open until the 30th of June, 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's called X-Tech Inversion. There are a set of 16 patents that have been very curated for broader commercialization, where there's a request for innovators from across the country to propose with 5 pages or less commercialization plans for this set of 16 patents. And so kind of apropos to this dual tech summit, many of the patents are just that. So autonomous water purification for wells that's relevant to military operations, but also can be very kind of broadly commercially and societally impactful. So there are 16 patents along those lines, and again, the initial entry is 5 pages or less, and so I know there were a lot of veterans or active duty folks within the community here, and for folks who are kind of deep tech founders and have that operational experience, I think that's that nuance that could make for a compelling submission to prize competitions like this. So the prizes are $20K for that initial down selection of the prize, and then an opportunity to pitch for even more prize money and potential opportunities to get SBIR awards beyond those prize competitions.
Well, that sounds like a super interesting opportunity, because you don't have to have invented anything. You just have to help commercialize it. So, I think that's a fantastic example of dual use, right? So, Kenny, can we dig down a little bit further into, what does public-private, examples look like, in a practical use case or example?
Absolutely. So one of the things that comes to mind recently is my team first I would say we can't exist without each other. And when I look at, let's say, the technology stack that enables my team, there's no secret sauce. The technology we're using is the same technology you're using at your company to conduct threat hunting, to do assessments, open source and commercially available tools. The secret sauce is our people, by the way. And so, we need the private sector to be coming up and bringing us the best technology. I look at the most successful engineering projects and technology innovations the U.S. government's ever done, like the Manhattan Project, naval nuclear reactors. I think we also did SE Linux, if you're a big nerd out there, and then like end of list, right? We're not making the best frontier AI model right now, and we haven't, and we won't likely for a while. And so one, we need you there, but we need each other as well. And so a mission we did recently, again, working with the private sector, is we conducted an assessment on a maritime technology product. And what was really interesting with the company asking us to do it. And what was really interesting about that is because our unique knowledge of the maritime domain and our experience across all critical infrastructure allowed us to find findings that your regular pen test company wasn't able to find, because of our unique knowledge and placement, working critical infrastructure across the country, both nationally and internationally. And so that's one really unique partnership where, on the government side, it feels like a lot of take. Give me your technology, I'll pay you licensing fee. But on the same side is we can bring that back in terms of cybersecurity services, and then using that to advance national security for everybody.
That is probably something most people didn't really know that the Coast Guard provides, or that the federal government can do in partnership. So something that I think is a good example of how we're all contributing to national security. You told me recently about a Wall Street Journal article. I'd love for you to share that with the audience if they didn't hear about it already.
Sure. So if you didn't see it recently, last week or the week before, there was a Wall Street Journal article on Coast Guard Cyber Command's participation in conducting boardings of dark fleet vessels and seizures of dark fleet vessels in the last year.
What's a dark fleet vessel?
So a dark fleet vessel is a vessel that is typically sanctioned by the United States or the greater international community that's transporting sanctioned oil, typically from like Iran or Venezuela or et cetera, et cetera. And recently, starting in December timeframe, the U.S. started interdicting and seizing these vessels. And so one of the key pieces of that was understanding that we now live in 2026, and a dark fleet tanker is old, but it's not that old. An old tanker, tankers don't have long lifespans, is around 10 to 15 years. And so a dark fleet tanker is 20 plus years. Well, that just means your tanker's running Windows Vista. You know what I mean? So, recognizing that the technology systems that enable these things, like an inert gas generator. So when you have 2 million barrels of crude on your ship, there tends to be space in those tanks, and you need to fill that space with inert gas so it doesn't explode. And so your inert gas generator is just part of your SCADA network that's connected to the rest of your ship. And so now we're putting coastal crews on these ships, and we have no idea about the cybersecurity posture of these ships. And so we started employing our teams really in an expeditionary type model to understand the cybersecurity vulnerabilities and posture of these vessels and help actively secure them in cyberspace. And again, that's the piece of that, public-private collaboration as well, is like we don't have necessarily all the answers in terms of the technology we're bringing. We're adapting commercial tools and processes that are born in the private sector and bringing those into missions on the absolute edge. And that's where I need that compute can't be in a cloud necessarily. That compute I need to bring with me. I need to be ready for kind of any environment to meet that mission.
Yeah, that was a pretty scary article. If you hadn't seen it, please go take a look at it. To just imagine how old those systems are and how vulnerable they can be, and then what can a vulnerable tanker do in the wrong place, right?
And it's our guy getting hoisted by the helicopter in that article as well.
Yeah, you're somebody you know.
Oh, it works for me. Yeah.
So, Pete, do you have something as juicy to tell us about? Something interesting?
I think today I was reading news bites that come out every day for us, and one of the things that surprised me was a lot of people around here wear Patagonia vests, and there was an acknowledgement on the Patagonia blog that in the 1980s, when the Army was searching for an alternative to kind of down within various types of sleeping bags or other to stay warm, but is it resistant to weather conditions, that path towards synthetic polyester, essentially stuffings, was in the 80s set the stage for companies like Patagonia and their sustainability. So not as juicy, but kind of cross-cutting. But one of the things I think that's less out there is the whole VR revolution. When you look at the genesis of the Oculus head-mounted display, which became Meta, which Facebook bought, really kind of goes back to one of the Army's university-affiliated research centers, where our Institute for Creative Technologies at the University of Southern California shaped by Army requirements to do very unique research to kind of drive down the cost of head-mounted displays to make them more accessible to military and broader use cases. That really drove Palmer Luckey at the time, the lab tech at our mixed reality lab, to commercialize that for kind of broader consumption. And so it's things coming out of the labs, whether it be within the Army research ecosystem, in our own labs, or with our academic partners, or with industry partners and other services as well, that are kind of driving innovation in kind of distant futures, or in some cases much closer to when the actual innovation happens. And so not landing on dark vessels, but evocative in other contexts. Yeah,
It's a team sport.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
I think that's pretty amazing. I mean, who in this room wants to be the next Anduril, Palmer Luckey at Anduril or Patagonia, right? So I feel like Pete's setting folks up with those patents to take that IP and turn it into something very profitable and very useful and very relevant to national security. All right. So final question: any advice you have to the founders here besides what we've already talked about?
Sure. So has anyone sold to the federal government before? Is anyone aware or tracking it? You've sold to the federal government. How easy are we to work with? No, we're pretty bad. We're pretty bad, right? And so I think setting expectations, right? And so we have a lot of great ways to do rapid innovation and rapid procurement. And you'll see that through Army Research Labs. Defense Innovation Unit is also in the Bay, and a lot of other services have rapid innovation programs. However, a lot of government slowness is a feature, not a bug. And so what you're thinking about is your next quarter sales and your QBRs and the bottom line for the quarter. And then we're thinking about, how do I sustain this 10 years from now? Am I sustaining it 10 years from now? And then what does the life cycle look like beyond a test period? And so setting expectations is like, imagine that you're selling to Cisco, Oracle, some of the biggest tech companies that you could possibly imagine. And when you're looking at that big sale, it's going to be an 18-month deal cycle potentially. Like if it's that big and that difficult, where you need to understand the organization, understand the account, understand who's the decision maker and who's not, because there's a lot of red herrings of who's the decision maker and who's not. That's probably the hardest part. It's just like, I don't even know where to start with the Army. Like, I don't even understand the Army. Like, I think I understand the Coast Guard, but the Army is so scary to me. And so I don't know, maybe you could shed some light on that. But, I think managing your expectations, but know that we also want to join you and do better. And we will do as much as we can to do better as well. And some things are easier than others.
Yeah, I was going to mention just not necessarily being outwardly transactional about engaging with the government, where it kind of get to know us for who we are, and then let us demystify the related parts of our services, and just along the lines of not being overly transactional, realizing that you're not selling into part of the government, but there are other parts of the government where they may be able to offer you time or other resourcing, like testing for various types of platforms, whether they be in the water, in the air, or in austere environments on the ground, that may be just as valuable to you as a funding round may be, that kind of follows that type of testing opportunity. So kind of not being transactional, kind of being open-minded to getting to know what opportunities there are in engaging with the government beyond some of the prize competition or other monetary aspects.
And to dovetail off that too, one of my experiences as well is sometimes in the private sector, as the capability provider, you're better at communicating and understanding who's doing what in the government than we are. You're like, oh, I'm selling this to the Coast Guard, I'm also selling it to the Navy, and like, I have no idea. Like there'd be no way I know it. So sometimes we get phenomenal connections and intel through you about what the federal government's doing that makes us stronger as well. So realize that you can also be that connective glue within the federal government, because the federal government is so big. So realize that you can be our force multiplier as well. And then that just helps your business case.
Thank you, Melissa, Kenneth, and Peter. Thank you for the great presentation.